Saludos a toda la afición de la lucha libre. Este que les habla es Michael Morales Torres, integrante del equipo de Lucha Libre Online. Y tenemos el enorme privilegio de presentarles a nuestro invitado en la tarde de hoy, directamente desde Estados Unidos para el mundo, ex superestrella de WWE, ex superestrella de WCW, actual motivational speaker para toda la juventud del mundo. Él es Marc Mero. Mr. Mero, it is an honor for us to have you here at Lucha Libre Online. How are you doing today, sir?
I am doing awesome, man. Michael, it's great to be on your show. We finally were able to connect, and I'm excited about today is here. And man, I'm really, I tell you, Lucha Libre is it's the man that when you talk about the pinnacle of professional wrestling, how far back it goes, man.
Yes.
The legends that come out of Lucha Libre.
Yeah, for us, as mentioned, it's an honor for us having you here. We've been trying to reach you for a while, so this is really exciting for me and for all of the guys in Lucha Libre Online. And I wanted to start the interview asking you, in terms of pro wrestling, which was either the wrestler or the match that inspired you in order to do that as your profession?
You know, it's funny you asked that. When I was a little kid, my dad somehow got us tickets to a wrestling match at the Buffalo War Memorial Auditorium. And I remember that the Sheik, the original Sheik was wrestling Bobo Brazil. And I remember the Sheik pulled out a pencil and he started stabbing Bobo in the head. And I was terrified. I was like, we were way up high, and I was thinking, like, I said to my dad, I go, why aren't they arresting him? Like Bobo was bleeding all over the place. And I was freaking out. I'm thinking, what is if he comes in the stands? I was terrified of this guy, And it's so funny that later on in my career, I'm wrestling at the Joe Louis Arena, and who comes backstage was the original Sheik. And I got to meet him. I told him the story about how he terrified me as a kid. Just an amazing time I'll never forget.
And regarding your training inside the pro wrestling industry, when did you decide that you wanted to start training to become a pro wrestler, and who was the person who properly trained you before making your debut for WCW?
Well, I didn't start until I was 30 years old, and it was on a whim. It was really weird. I had a bunch of friends over my apartment, and one of my buddies, he was flipping through the TV channels, and he landed on professional wrestling. So I go, whoa, stop it there. Let me see this. And as I'm watching the television, it brought back memories when I was a kid, going to the wrestling matches. And I said, man, I could do this. And my buddies, they busted out laughing. They go, look at the size of those guys, man. Like, I think the Road Warriors were on or someone. They go, they'll pick you up over their head and throw you right out of that ring. I said, no, I'm telling you, I can do that. My other buddy goes, Mark, you're 30 years old. When you start a pro career now? And I just said those two words, man, I believe. And I found out where there's wrestling school because some of the guys at the gym I was weightlifting at were the guys that would drive to Atlanta to do enhancement matches for the superstars of wrestling. And so I went to Boris Malenko had a wrestling school in Tampa. It's about 60 miles away from where I used to live. I drive there like after work and on weekends. And then 1 year later, I was so blessed to sign a big contract with WCW as the character Johnny B. Bad.
And you got to the WCW. I mean, it is a pretty interesting fact that you started at 30. DDP started at 35. So to the audience out there that are listening, there's no limit. There's no age limit. If you want to do this, just put all your heart there and obviously get the proper training and you can reach it. Marc Mero did, and he was an incredible superstar. But you reached WCW. Who was the person responsible for bringing you for the first time to that company?
Well, I mean, the guy that gave me my break, obviously, was Dusty Rhodes. I mean, I was one of those guys got beat up on television for $150. And he said to me after one of my matches, he said, hey, kid, anybody ever tell you look like Little Richard? I thought he was talking about a wrestler. So I said, who's Little Richard? He goes, you don't know Little Richard. He starts singing, Tutti Frutti, oh, Rudy, and he's singing, and I go, oh, the singer, Little Richard. And I said, no one's ever told me that. He goes, I think I got a gimmick for you. And he saw this character that, I don't think anyone would have ever seen. And I became the character Johnny B. Bad. And it was some of the most memorable moments in my professional wrestling career was working with Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, teaching me how to become Johnny B. Bad.
And let's fast forward over there a little bit. On 1994, you receive a pretty unique opportunity and you had a match with, at that point, Ravishing Rick Rude. He was the champion over there in WCW. What do you recall of working with him and receiving that opportunity for the World Heavyweight Championship back then?
You know, the one thing I remember more than anything was how generous he was, how good he made me look in that match. I mean, he was allowing me to do everything, you know, close pinfalls, 1 and 2, barely kick out, you know, and it was, you know, a guy like that that's been around for a long time and this newcomer coming in and they're giving him kind of a push to that. He just made me look good. He shined me and it did nothing but help my career take off.
And why did you decided to leave WCW at that point, where you reached directly by someone in WWF, and that was the reason of your decision?
Well, my first contract was up in WCW, I actually had dinner with Vince McMahon, and at that time they were not giving out guaranteed contracts, and I was offered a big 3-year guaranteed deal at WCW, and he shook my hand. He understood, you know. He said, you know, someday we're gonna do business together. And then the next time, 3 years later, when my contract was up again, is when he not only gave me the first guaranteed contract, but he gave me a big signing bonus and everything I wanted, he gave to me to bring me over from WCW to WWF. At that time, it's called WWF. And but also, you know, I always thought about my career in wrestling, and you know, the WrestleMania was like the Super Bowl of wrestling. It's like the World Cup, you know, and I felt like I never would have felt like I always wanted to go to the dance, which was WrestleMania, you know. And so that was like the highlight of my career was making it to WrestleMania and actually wrestling in WrestleMania. So no regrets. I mean, my favorite time obviously was the character Johnny B. Bad with WCW, but I have no regrets. All the different paths I took, good or bad, led me to right where I am talking to you, Michael, on Lucha Libre.
Awesome. And what do you recall of that first meeting with Vince McMahon? How was him, you know, besides the ownership and the businessman part, how was him approaching you as a human being that night?
You mean the first time when we didn't make the deal?
The first dinner.
Great. You know what? He flew me in. I went to his house and had dinner with his family. And he treated me like I was just, you know, he treated me great. I mean, you know, he was very, you know, he understood. I mean, they were not giving out guaranteed contracts at that time. It was like, you got to prove yourself and you have to, you know, you get paid by the house, how big the house was and everything else. So, and I already had a big guaranteed deal. So I wasn't going to lose out on that. And he completely understood. He like shook my hand and gave me a hug, you know, and off I went. But I always felt like we would do business someday. And then when it was time, he said, I'll give you your guaranteed contract. And then, but it opened the doors for all the wrestlers to get guaranteed contracts and big contracts that made mine look tiny at that time, you know?
And, you know, you mentioned that your dream was to wrestle at WrestleMania. For that, you needed to sign with the WWF. So you signed with the company at that point. But how did you felt going through that curtain in your first match? Do you remember your opponent? Do you remember how the audience felt at that moment, the energy you felt going through that curtain that night?
My first match with WWF, I could actually remember, like I could picture the whole match. You know, obviously a lot of nerves being the new guy. And they gave me this, you know, when I went to WWF Creative to figure out what character, because we couldn't use Johnny B. Bad. It was trademarked by WCW Wrestling. So they came up with this character called Wild Man, my real name, Marc Mero. And I never really connected with it. Like I remember in the meeting, Vince said to me, "Can you do like a Tarzan yell?" Like, oh. I thought, no, I don't got a very strong voice. So I told I don't see myself doing that, you know. I even tried it, but I'd never connected with the character Wild Man. I mean, Johnny B was so off the wall, was so opposite of who I really am. And it was just a flamboyant, outrageous character that was fun to play. It was like just acting. But Wild Man Marc Mero was too close to home. I think it just didn't really sit well with me, and I never really connected with it, and I don't think the audience really connected with it. But my first match was against Isaac Yankem, who obviously became Kane, you know.
96.
And again, a guy that knew his position at the time was to do the job for me, and he did everything to make me look good and shine me my first match with WWF, and everyone was happy. We didn't really know what finisher I was using. I think I used a sunset flip off the top rope to beat him, if I can remember correctly. But it just didn't have, I didn't have the finisher because we weren't going to bring like the boxing punch, the tutti frutti from WCW over.
And whose idea was to pair you up with, at that moment, your former wife, Sable? You were the wrestler, she was the manager, but we saw this interesting dynamic that at that point it wasn't seen before anywhere else. So who came up with this incredible idea?
Well, it's funny you asked that because that was part of my contract negotiations. Was
Oh.
I was married to her real name is Rena. I was married to Rena while I was with WCW as Johnny B. Bad for many years. And when I brought her, we were married 10 years. And I remember bringing her over to WWF. I said to Vince, I said, Vince, one of the deals I want, obviously you gave me my signing bonus, you gave me my guaranteed contract, but I want my wife flying everywhere I fly. Now, this is before you ever even seen her, or I even asked him to let her be my valet. And he said, wow, that's the strangest request I've ever had. He goes, no one's ever asked to fly their wife with them. But see, I seen everybody going through divorce. And I thought, you know what, if we're together, we can make it. We can live this experience, travel all over the world together. And then so I said to Vince, after he agreed to it, I said, do you mind if I use her for my valet since she's going to be traveling everywhere I go anyways? He goes, let's just worry about you right now. So he flew me to New York, to Stamford, Connecticut to sign my deal. And when he sent me my plane ticket, there was only one. So I called him up. I said, hey, Vince, there's only one ticket here. I go, my wife flies everywhere I fly. He goes, to sign a contract? I said, she goes everywhere I go. So sure enough, Vince sent the ticket for my wife. He flies us both in. And when she walks in his office with me, he goes, I got to put her on TV. And that's the beginning of, then we came up with the name Sable. And that was the beginning, how it all started.
And to take that, since we are already on this topic, how was your experience working with her, but not as your manager, but as your rival? I mean, at that point we saw intergender matches, but it wasn't that common. So that this really, I mean, the power bomb, I had that image still in my head, and you sold it so perfectly well. I mean, you didn't have an ego problem. You work simply to raise the business and raise her as well as a star. So how was your experience working with her as your rival?
We had so much fun. A lot of people say, well, you killed your career letting a woman beat on you, but you got to remember something. They were backing up the Brinks truck to our house at the time. We were a married couple, we're in this together. It's a business deal that we're making. It wasn't like, I was doing it with somebody else. I did it with my own, it was my own family. And if I race, remember, I'm getting a guaranteed contract. I'm getting paid the same no matter whether I win or lose. Now we're raising her profile where she's selling, other than it's the only one selling more merchandise at that time was like Stone Cold Steve Austin. She was doing amazing. So what a blessing that was to do that, to work with her. And not only that, teach her how to wrestle. I mean, she was doing, she did a hurricanrana off the top rope. She's doing all the moves I did, my TKO. She did the power bomb, they called it the Sable bomb. And these were moves that I was using in the ring that we just let her do it. But obviously doing it to me, it was a lot safer because I could go with her and really do a good job and sell it the way she needed to be sold.
And what do you remember the night you won the Intercontinental Championship for the first time? What was the first thing that came through your mind once you hold the gold and look at it like, I made it. I finally made it. This is my big chance.
It was the approval of the company to say, we're giving this guy the belt. I think of the guys I went against that. It was a tournament for the Intercontinental title. I beat Owen Hart. I beat Stone Cold Steve Austin. I beat Ron Simmons, Farouk. And, to be put over guys like that, it was just an amazing accomplishment in the sense that they chose me to hold the strap.
And fast forwarding a little bit, once you were out of WWF, you still had a $350,000 salary left for 3 more years. But I believe due to the injuries and everything, you didn't wrestle for approximately 8 months. You had a shoulder surgery as well. So when did you decided, along with at the point your wife, it was time to leave WWF and start something different for both of your lives?
Well, we kind of left unceremoniously in a sense that my wife filed a wrongful sexual harassment lawsuit against them. So obviously, me with 3 years left on a big contract, over well over $1 million, I walked out with her and said, I'm done, and unfortunately, she decided she wanted to come back to wrestling and then re-signed with WWF, and our lives were forever changed.
And after that, on 2000, you re-wrestled once again for WCW. You got offered a full-time deal with a lot of money in the middle of it, but you decided that was not for you at that point. Why did you rejected that contract opportunity from WCW?
Well, there really wasn't any specific number. It was just talk at that time, but
Okay.
I had so many surgeries, total reconstruction of my knee. I had 4 or 5 elbow surgeries, 5 shoulder surgeries. My body was pretty beat up. And, I'm now closing in on 40 years old at that time. And I just felt that I just needed some time to recondition my body. And then I think the opportunity with the XWF came, with Hulk Hogan. I did that for a little while. Then TNA, I did that for a little while. And then I ended up retiring, and my last match was in 2006. So I was 46 years old when I had my last wrestling match. And but my body's all healed up. I feel great. I stay in really good condition. I eat good, and I'm happy. And that's the most thing. But more important than being happy in life is being content in life, because happiness comes and goes. Life goes up and down. Everybody goes through stuff, but being content in life is the best feeling ever.
Human beings are interesting creatures because we may fall multiple times, but we keep getting up, cleaning our face and our tears, and keep fighting. And that's exactly what you did. But you had a pretty interesting story that touched me. I mean, you had an overdose, not once, not twice, but 3 times in the same night, and almost die. You fought out of death, you cheated death, you stand it up, you clean up your tears, you got sober, and you're here today telling your story. How did Marc Mero do it? Did it? I mean, there are so many
Oh,
people struggling with drugs that they just can't find a way out.
well, first of all, let me correct you on one thing. It wasn't three overdoses in one night. This was three drug overdoses where I almost died on 3 different
Okay.
occasions.
Oh wow. Okay.
But just to get the record straight, and I just remember getting to a point in my life. For those that don't know my story, I lost my little brother and sister. They both died at 21. My mom died at 58. My dad died while I was holding my arms, losing tons of friends, and even in the wrestling industry. I lived a very tough life. I grew up on the west side of Buffalo, New York, gang infested, drug infested neighborhood. So I had a kind of the deck stacked against me as a kid, single family home, mom working 2 jobs, the typical story. And I've always been a fighter, man. I just kept coming back. But the drugs were the one thing that really took me down. I mean, really, really affected my life, becoming a drug addict. And my drug of choice was cocaine back then. It was like just doing drugs all the time and then using things that fall asleep or wake up, and you're just killing yourself. And then for me, my change in my life was actually one day getting down on my knees, man, asking God into my life, and it has been forever changed. It's funny. I haven't touched a drug since 2003. So when you're talking 18 years without touching a drug and never going to rehab, not that I don't respect and admire people that go to rehab and can get themselves clean, but mine was a little different. It was a spiritual awakening in my life, and I've been ever so blessed. And then now sharing my story and helping these young people today all over I average about 230 events a year for the last 14 years, up until the pandemic came. This is the first year that obviously we can't go to schools, churches, or corporations because of the pandemic, but we hope to get back on the road next year, just like we have been all these years. But there's just no greater joy, man, than helping another person, and especially people that write to you and tell you you changed or saved their life. It's the greatest joy.
And how the being in a wrestling environment made that drug situation and that situation and with your life as a general more complicated. It being in the wrestling industry made you more down than you were supposed to be.
Well, my drugs really took off when I was with WCW. When I came over to the WWF or WWE, when I came with my wife, we stayed clean, and it wasn't until after wrestling ended with WWF that I got back into drugs, and my wife and I got divorced, and I went really off the deep end, and that's when I almost died. You know, I would just and felt suicidal, felt the depression, the anxiety, all the things that I talk about, or people that go through that can relate to my story and said, man, I know exactly how that guy feels. And that's the blessing, because knowing what I went through and how I felt and how depressed I got and how I just didn't want to be here anymore, and then getting destroyed financially and everything else. It's like, man, you gotta have a setback to have a comeback, you know. And that was a setback, and then making a comeback and then getting it all back, you know, making a new life for yourself, and one that, oh, I don't know. When I look back on my life, I'm taking my last breath. I think the thing I'm gonna remember the most is these presentations where I was able to help other people.
If you allow me, I want to say something in Spanish for a Spanish speaking audience, even though this is going to have at one point some inserts of me translating all this. But a todos los amigos pueden seguir a Marc Mero directamente en todas sus redes sociales. Su canal de YouTube está extremadamente encendido. Ahí tienen muchos mensajes positivos. Simplemente vayan a youtube.com/themarkmero, youtube.com/themarkmero. Instagram lo pueden conseguir como @markmero, al igual que Twitter e Instagram @markmero. De igual manera pueden conseguirlo en Facebook como Marc Mero Page, Facebook como Marc Mero Page. De igual manera pueden conseguirlo en su website thinkpoz.org, 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 y ahí pueden conseguirlo. De igual manera en su correo electrónico, a todos los que estén interesados en algún servicio de este motivational speaker que ha pasado por toda la vida y se ha levantado y puede ayudarte a ti a encaminarte en el camino correcto. Simplemente tienen que contactarlo a través de info@thinkpoz.org, info@thinkpoz.org, y ahí pueden, sea para escuelas, sea para universidades, para diferentes tipos de seminarios. Este es el caballero que ustedes necesitan, brindándole esa dirección en la vida, porque él estuvo ahí y logró levantarse. So after that, I wanted to ask, how did this thinkpoz.org project started? I mean, when did you decide that it was time to tell your story, to inspire others to change their lives?
Well, again, it was something that kind of just fell in my lap. What happened was a football coach from one of the high schools asked me if I would come and talk to football players about not doing drugs. And I said, sure. So I talked to 60 players. And then it was funny because I started getting some emails from the players on how the presentation really inspired them. I remember how good that felt, you know. But unbeknownst to me, they called another school, and that school asked me if I would come and speak to the whole school. And I said, sure. But I realized that, you know, when you're talking to young people, you have to captivate them. And I did that, obviously come from the wrestling industry. You go, you know, let me make it bigger than life, man. So as I'm talking, I'm showing videos and pictures behind me of my life story, of the people I met, the places I've gone, superstars, movie stars, athletes that I've met, and they're flashing behind me, and then shows my apartment where I grew up as a little kid. So it captivates people, and they feel like they know me, or they feel like they can relate to my story.
Marc, why did you decide to retire from the pro wrestling industry? When was the moment you decided, okay, this is my time?
Well, I mean, obviously being up in age at 46 with my last match, but you know, I seen that gosh darn Diamond Dallas Page come back at like 60 years old. You know, he lives by me here in Florida. We're good friends. We do the DDPY yoga together, and we're very close. We're very competitive. Okay, not only I won Rookie of the Year at 31, he won it at 35. He keeps topping me. I was most improved player, wrestler, and he does it too. And now he goes out and wrestles at 60 years old. Now, I just turned, he's 60, he's 64 now. He did it when he was 63. I'm turning 61 in 4 months. So I might even wait till I'm 65 to do it, to top him now, okay?
And how did your relationship with Diamond Dallas Page helps you, feeling that fire inside your heart. I mean, we've seen the pictures practicing the DDP yoga, but as you mentioned, both of you are very competitive together. How's your relationship with DDP?
we're best of friends. I mean, he's one of my closest friends. We inspire each other. Iron sharpens iron, the Bible says, and we are two people that just bring each other up, man. I mean, it's funny when we're together. It's like we're just like almost like just keep lifting each other on different things, different projects that we're working on. He encourages me. I certainly encourage him. A lot of people don't know this though, but the famous video that I did about my mother, a lot of times when I would come to Atlanta, I would stay with DDP when I was touring before I moved here. And so when I was doing a bunch of schools in the Atlanta area, and he said to me, one of the schools I was doing was closer to his home. And he said, he's got a whole film crew there because of DDP yoga. And he said, do you mind if the guys come down and film your presentation at the school? I said, sure, why not? So they came and filmed it. And about a week later, he calls me up. He goes, hey, bro, the guys put together this 5-minute video. Do you mind if we put it on YouTube? And I said, sure, go ahead. Never thinking much about it. He goes, and he made a joke. He goes, you never know, it might go viral. Go, who'd ever think that 500 million people would see this video? It's absolutely crazy how it took off and how it's affected so many people, because I share from my heart about my mother, and everyone's got a mom, and some of us, a mom and a son are so close. And so a lot of guys can relate to having a mom that raised them and worked hard in their life to give them the best life possible. So it touches a lot of hearts and changes a lot of lives.
And to all our friends, the video is available, as I mentioned before, on youtube.com/Marc Mero. Trust me, it is a good message, but it is a difficult video to watch without dropping it here. So to all the fans out there, I encourage you to see it. Mr. Mero, first of all, it's been more than an honor for us to have you here as our guest today. Last but not least, what message can you send to all the people out there that are struggling with life in general, that their parents or their brothers or their family members are sick, or themselves are sick, that they don't see the light at the end of the tunnel anyways? They are struggling constantly, and they need this message so much to keep fighting, to keep going into a correct pathway. What message can you send to all the people out there in all the languages that are struggling in life right now?
Well, thank you, Michael. First of all, I want to say to all my brothers and sisters out there and everyone listening to this message, we all go through stuff in life. You're not alone. We all go through storms of life, if you will. Some storms you can just walk through, some storms you got to run through, but there are storms that come in our lives that we have to hang on with everything we got. Don't let go and don't give up, because I promise you, after every storm, the sun will eventually shine, and it's going to be brighter than you could ever imagine. Never give up. You have no idea the great things that will come in your life if you just hang in there.
That was beautiful, Mr. Mero. Honored to have you here as our guest in Lucha Libre Online. And to all the people out there, once again, youtube.com/Marc Mero, Instagram and Twitter at Marc Mero, Facebook, Marc Mero page, the website thinkpoz.org, and the email info@thinkpoz.org for all information. Honored to have you here as our guest, sir. Thank you so much for sharing your story here with us, and always wishing you success in your life.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, Michael. Thank you, and thank you to all the fans and families and friends out there. God bless you guys.
Amen. Y a todos los fanáticos, sigan pendientes de Lucha Libre Online, la marca número 1 de Pro Wrestling y Combat Sports en español.